Hello again, I'm Sam B. Hanson. I've returned today to my hometown of Wimborne Minster in Dorset, and as you can see, to the Minster itself to play the organ. And what I'm going to play today is a few pieces of my own that I wrote some time ago, some earlier pieces of mine. But I wanted to show you a bit of the building as well. So let's have a little look around. Now, there's been a place of worship on this site since AD 705, when St. Cuthberga, who's the patron saint of the church, founded the then Benedictine Abbey of Nuns, if I understand correctly. And various parts, as you can see from this floor plan, of the building have been added progressively over time until we've got the building that we've got today. I'm currently at the west end of the church, which is on the left of this diagram, that little yellow section underneath one of the two towers that you saw in the opening scene, the nearer of the two towers that you saw in the opening scene, which is the baptistry. And in the baptistry we have a few nice things. Over here, first of all, is a very lovely memorial stained glass window for Michael James. Michael James was assistant organist here in the late 70s, early 80s, until his very untimely death at the age of 30, I believe. And this window was installed in his memory. There's also a music trust, the Michael James Music Trust, from which I benefited as a teenager. My organ scholarship at St. Peter's Church, Bournemouth, was very kindly funded by them. Over here, on the other side, is the astronomical clock. And you see the Earth is in the centre, and the sun goes round the outside once a day, pointing to the 24 hours of the day. I've also got the phases of the moon there, I believe, in the middle circle. And down here, as one might expect to find, you can hear the quarter jack there, just chiming the quarter hour. Saw him at the beginning as well. This is the font, which you'd normally expect to find in a baptistry where people of all ages, particularly babies, are baptised as they come into the church. Building is closed at the moment for COVID reasons, so I'm particularly grateful to the rector and the church wardens and the organist for letting me film here today on the organ. So I'm just going to take you through the gate. So I'm now heading towards, you can see the high altar at the east end with its very fine cloth. And you see, if you come and visit, you can see the changes in architecture, various points of the building, as the floor plan was pointing out. A nice wooden roof up here. There it is. And these arches, I either drew or painted these arches once for GCSE art coursework. One of the greatest moments of my GCSE career was discovering that I'd been awarded a B in GCSE art, which was fantastic because it was at least 2 grades higher than I thought it was going to be. And I have this building to thank partly for that. And there's the West End. And over on this side, in a moment, is the organ with its rather fine horizontal trumpets. I hear stories of parents and children visiting the Minster, and they wander around and they come to this point in the Minster, and they look up at the trumpets, and the child says to the parent, "Oh, I wonder what sound they make." And the parent says, "No, don't be silly, they're just for show, surely." I'm going to prove to you in a moment that is very much not the case, and they do make quite a sound. And over on the other side, as you can not quite see, there's the pulpit. It's just coming to view now on the left, is the console. You can see some of the stops on the console there, and the mirror on the top, there it is. That's where we're heading next. So here we are at the console. I went through various bits of organ terminology in video 7, when I introduced the organ of St Peter's Church, Hammersmith, where I now play regularly. But I thought it'd be nice just to point out a few differences that we've got between Hammersmith and the organ here. So at Hammersmith we had 2 keyboards, 2 manuals, and 20 speaking stops. What I mean by speaking stop is a stop that when you pull it out and play, it makes a sound of some kind, as opposed to a stop that does another job. There's a row of couplers here which you can't see very well, it's just around the corner, such as I said, a coupler stop that you pull out. It doesn't make any noise on its own, but it joins the sounds of 2 manuals together, couples 2 manuals together. Here, as you can see, this is a much larger instrument. We've got 3 manuals and 54 speaking stops, considerably more than Hammersmith, nearly 3 times as many. The top 2 manuals are called the swell and the great, just as they were at Hammersmith. That was the names of the 2 manuals that we had at Hammersmith. And here, the bottom one, the extra one, is called the positive. It would normally, in this country, be called the choir, because you'd normally expect the 3rd manual down here to function more or less as a smaller grate. It would have similar stops to that which you'd find on the grate, the biggest manual of the organ, but on a smaller scale. And the idea is that those stops might be used to accompany the singing choir, who in this building are directly behind the player on the organ. But here we've got various brighter sounds, which earns it the name positive rather than choir, because it's got a different kind of feel to it. Another difference you might notice is the presence of these buttons here called pistons. At Hammersmith I've got a few what we call composition pedals, these big pedals down here. There's similar ones down here, but they're bigger at Hammersmith, and fewer of them. And the function of those was to draw out preset combinations of stops so that I can change sound without having to take my hands off the keys. And these do exactly the same job, there's just more of them. So where are you going to be able to, you'll be able to see these ones, won't you? You'll see the stops hopefully coming out over there in various combinations. So there's a row here for the positive, there's a row here for the great, which also, if I pull out this stop, adjusts the pedal stops at the same time. You might just be able to see, yep, there they are. And a row for the swell here as well. There we are. And these 8 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, are called general pistons, which affect the entire organ. So if I want to make a particularly dramatic change of stops, I can set these up and achieve that change very quickly, which is very useful, particularly on an organ of this size. That's particularly useful. At the time of filming, at the moment, the organ here is mere days away from beginning a refurbishment. In a few days' time, it's going to be dismantled completely and it'll be out of action for about 12 months. And when it's put back in, the specification will be slightly bigger. They're going to add a few stops, which is very exciting, and change the layout of the pipes on the inside of the case, partly to make it easier to get to certain parts of the organ for tuning and maintenance, and partly to make it speak more into the building, because at the moment it's quite sort of crammed in, trapped in its cubby hole over there, I suppose. And the organist has to use most of the organ when accompanying a big service with lots of congregation for the organ to be heard properly at the back of the church. So these sound like good things for the organ, and it'd be good to come back in 2022, hopefully, and play the organ in its new incarnation. But today, this is my last chance to play the organ as I've always known it, as it has stood up to this point since 1965. It was last rebuilt. One other thing I forgot to mention, down here we've got a much more conventional swell pedal. You can see me rocking my foot backwards and forwards there. If I pull out some stops on the swell, there we are, there's a chord on the swell. I can open the box, which you might remember from video 7. It gets louder, and I close the box. And it gets quieter again. And the equivalent at Hammersmith was a sidekick pedal over here, which is much more rare. This is much more conventional pedal and easier to use generally. While I'm here today, I've got 4 pieces to play to you, all of which I wrote myself some years ago now. The first is a fanfare in A minor, which I wrote in 2000. This was inspired by the fanfare for organ by Percy Whitlock, who was organist at St Stephen's Church, Bournemouth, in the 1930s, about 10 miles from here, not far from here at all. The outer sections, I've followed his structuring of the piece. My piece is very similarly structured to the Whitlock. The outer sections feature a sort of battle between the grate, mostly the grate, and the orchestral trumpets, the horizontal trumpets that you saw just now, which are played down here on the positive. I changed between the two. That's in the outer sections, and there's a much calmer, softer middle section using just the string and flute stops of the organ. So here I am in St George's Chapel. This is one of two side chapels in the Minster, in the northeast corner of the building. In September 2020, I released 4 videos on the channel leading up to the release of my synth jazz album, the Atmosphere Suite. That was videos 13 to 16. And in the first of those videos, I mentioned that the first track of the album, the Prelude, was originally an organ piece, when I thought the whole thing was going to be an organ piece in the end, before it went jazz. So I thought I'd play it here today as well. I wrote this in 2009, just the year before I recorded the rest of the album. And this just uses the string stops of the swell, a flute on the grate, and a 16-foot bass in the pedal. This is the window in Trinity Chapel, the other side chapel in the southeast corner of the building. And I come now to the oldest piece in the video called Summer Berceuse. And Berceuse is French for lullaby. And as such, this piece has a lazy, winding melody throughout the piece, using stops from the positive organ particularly, the positive manual at the bottom of the organ, but also a little bit from the grate. I wrote this in 1999 originally, when I was inspired by an improvisation by Pierre Cochereau, who was organist titulaire, the solo organist, if you like, at Notre Dame in Paris between 1955 and his death in 1984. And the improvisation was called Berceuse à la mémoire de Louis Vierne, Lullaby to the Memory of Louis Vierne, which he originally improvised in 1973 and has been transcribed and performed by various organists since then. And this piece of mine went through a few different versions in 99, and last year, 2020, I consolidated them into a final version, which we're going to hear today, which included a 4-bar section at the end of the middle section, which was constructed from the original material, but bridged a previous gap that I'd been having a bit of trouble with. So I come now to the last piece in today's video. This is a toccata, or a showpiece, on the plainsong hymn Exultet caelum laudibus, which I finished in early 2003. And this plainsong hymn, which is originally in Latin, I've got an English translation here in the New English Hymnal. And the first verse of it sounds like this. Let the round world with songs rejoice. Let heaven return the joyful voice, all mindful of the apostles' fame. Let heaven and earth their praise proclaim. That's the theme on which this piece is based. And what I've done is I've taken the first two phrases of that four-phrase tune and extended them to make two themes. So the first phrase was this. And I've extended it into this. So that's my first theme, and you hear that right at the beginning of the piece in the feet, in the bass, in the pedals. And the second phrase, which was this, I've turned into this to make my second theme. And you hear that in the middle, at the top of the texture. And accompanying all of this are a series of quickly moving hand figures, if you like, which were inspired by a couple of 20th century French composers, namely Olivier Messiaen with his piece Dieu parmi nous, which means God among us, which is the last movement from his La Nativité du Seigneur, the nativity of the Lord, which is based, as you might guess, on the Christmas story. And there's a toccata at the end of that where he has a series of repeated chords, a couple in one hand, a couple in the other, and he changes from one to the other. And I've been inspired by that and used a similar figure in my piece here. The other piece is by Marcel Dupré, the third movement of his organ symphony called Évocation, which was written in memory of his father. And that has, again, quite angry, particularly angry, repeated chords at the top, and you hear that a little bit in the middle, but more so towards the end as well. So here we are, Toccata on Exultet caelum laudibus. And here we are at the east end of the building. The high altar is just behind the camera, which you saw earlier, and we're looking west down the church and towards the baptistry where I started earlier on. You can see the choir stalls in the middle. I felt very lucky to sing alto here in the choir between the ages of 12 and 29. Even when I was away doing other things, I was always wanting to come back and sing here. It's a special place. So if you haven't visited before, do come and have a look around once the various restrictions have lifted. Thanks very much for watching today. There are PDFs of all the pieces I've played today available through the website for download, samhanson.co.uk. Just go to the top right corner of the homepage where it says shop. That should take you to a page where you're able to download the music that I've played today, and I'll put a link in the description as well. The next video, which will be in just over 2 weeks' time on Easter Sunday, the 4th of April 2021, will be a series of choral pieces to mark Holy Week and Easter, Holy Week being the week that begins with Palm Sunday and leads up to Easter Day itself. We'll be joined by a few friends for that. And the video after that, slightly less than 2 weeks after that, back on Fridays on the 16th of April, will be an introduction to the Hammond organ, which is a quite different beast from what I've been playing today, but with a certain amount of crossover as well. So I hope to see you for those two. But for today, that's it. Thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.